that he continues to advance his readiness should he choose to go down a military path here. Should he choose to invade again, he is doing all the things you would expect him to do to make sure he's ready for that option or options.
So there's no indication, for example, that what they've called exercises have ended in any way or are changing in any way, their presence either?
I want to be careful to characterize another nation's exercises. We've seen them conduct these exercises in recent days. Exercises are designed to make you ready. And that gets to my previous point. He continues to do the things that you would expect one to do if one was planning on a major military action, and that is to sharpen the readiness and to add to the capabilities of his force. Now, look, we obviously don't want that to be the outcome, and neither do the Ukrainians, and certainly neither do our NATO allies. And Foreign Minister Lavrov said earlier today that, or seemed to indicate that he still thinks there's oxygen here for diplomacy. We would welcome a pursuit of that path by the Russians, because we too believe that there still should be and can be a diplomatic path forward.
Are you still suggesting that Putin has not taken a decision to invade Ukraine?
We still don't believe that some final decision has been made.
Then how is it that communications continue, and we just heard from President Zelensky that he's been told that an invasion will happen on February 16th, which is Wednesday. How do you reconcile Putin hasn't taken a decision, but an invasion is happening on the 16th?
Well, I'm not going to talk about specific intelligence assessments. I think you can understand that. We have said for a while now that military action could happen any day. And you heard from the National Security Advisor making it clear that it certainly could happen before the end of the Olympics, maybe even this week. We have shared with our allies and partners, and that includes Ukraine, our assessment of the information that we've been receiving, and certainly have reflected in those conversations our deep concern about the continued capabilities that Mr. Putin has at his beck and call. So I won't get into a specific date. I don't think that would be smart. I would just tell you that it is entirely possible that he could move with little to no warning.
What will the U.S. response be at that time? The Defense Secretary is going to the NATO ministerial. Are we talking about the NATO response force being activated? What would we expect to see?
President Biden has made clear that should there be another incursion into Ukraine, that the United States would respond swiftly with severe economic consequences. I won't speak for the alliance. A decision to activate the NATO response force is a decision that the NAC has to make, the North Atlantic Council has to make. That's not something that the United States would unilaterally call into being. I will only add this, and this is why a couple of weeks ago we talked about making our contribution to the response force more ready. And so we've done that. And one of the messages that the Secretary will carry with him to NATO is that our contribution to the NATO response force, should it be called, should it be activated, they'll be ready to go.
And just to be clear, your answer to Bob, you do not see evidence that his forces have moved into attack positions yet?
I'm not going to talk about what specifically we're seeing on the ground when it comes to unit by unit. What I would tell you is that we continue to see him advance his readiness and improve his capabilities and provide himself more options should he decide to take military action in Ukraine.
President Biden spoke today with Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom. The leaders discussed their recent diplomatic engagements with Ukraine and Russia. They also reviewed ongoing diplomatic and deterrence efforts in response to Russia's continued military buildup on Ukraine's borders and reaffirmed their support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They discussed efforts to reinforce the defensive posture on NATO's eastern flank and underline the continued close coordination among allies and partners, including on readiness to impose severe consequences on Russia should it choose further military escalation. Thank you for the question. We are actively working to reach a diplomatic solution to de-escalate the crisis. Over the weekend, as you all know, the president spoke with President Putin, and we remain engaged with the Russian government in full coordination with our allies and partners. The path for diplomacy remains available if Russia chooses to engage constructively. However, we are clear-eyed about the prospects of that given the steps Russia is taking on the ground in plain sight. This is something that the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, talked about right here on Friday. Right before our eyes, what we're seeing with Russia. We're seeing new Russian forces have been arriving at the Ukrainian border every day. As we have said before, we're in the window when an invasion could begin at any time. We will not comment on any details of our intelligence information, except to say that it could begin this week, despite a lot of speculation that it would happen after the Olympics. Again, something that Jake Sullivan said right here on Friday. It remains unclear which path Russia will choose to take. The U.S. is ready for any situation. You know, President Biden has made it very clear on his call with Putin this weekend that if Russia undertakes a further invasion of Ukraine, the United States, together with our allies and partners, will respond decisively and impose swift and severe costs on Russia. We only continue to see a buildup, not a de-escalation. So we are open to diplomacy. That door to diplomacy is open, as we have said, and so that is that's what we want to be headed towards. And you know, if we will be ready for whichever decision that President Putin decides, but clearly we would prefer the path of diplomacy. I also want to just say one more thing really quickly. This is something that my colleague Kirby said, John Kirby said at the Department of Defense just now, that Secretary Austin is going to travel to Belgium, Poland, and Lithuania, so that you all have this. The Secretary is going to meet with allied defense ministers and NATO leadership to discuss Russia's military buildup in and around Ukraine, reiterate the U.S. commitment to Article 5, and continue the alliance's progress on deterrence and defense while ensuring the alliance is prepared to face tomorrow's challenge.
So let me start by saying this. We don't take this sort of action without the most thorough deliberation. And over the course of the last few days, these deliberations have led to a series of staffing changes in Ukraine. We feel all of these actions were absolutely necessary, and decisions were made with one thing and one thing in mind, and that is the safety and security of U.S. citizens and our colleagues on the ground. Now, let me tell you what made this necessary. Russia's continued escalation and seriously threatening military posture, as we have all seen in recent weeks and recent days. We are basing our assessment on what we are seeing on the ground with our own eyes, which is a continued and unprovoked Russian buildup on the border with Ukraine and no accompanying evidence of de-escalation. It is a distinct possibility, perhaps more real than ever before, that Russia may decide to proceed with military action. With new Russian forces continuing to arrive at the Ukrainian border and Russian forces staged all around Ukraine, an invasion, as we have said, could begin at any time. Should Putin decide to order it, there would be widespread human suffering. All the while, we are actively working to try to reach a diplomatic solution, and we remain engaged with the Russian government following President Biden's call with President Putin over the weekend. But since no one has full visibility into President Putin's decision-making, and there hasn't, as I said before, been any tangible sign of de-escalation, we have taken the prudent steps of updating the travel advisory for Ukraine to urge U.S. citizens to leave Ukraine immediately using any available mode of transportation. And now, most recently, as you saw just a little bit ago, we are in the process of relocating our diplomatic staff from Kyiv to Lviv. The staff in Lviv, including our chargé, Christina Kevin, will remain engaged with the Ukrainian government, coordinating on diplomatic efforts. We will continue our close coordination with Ukraine as well as with our allies and partners. Russia, if it sought to do so, has failed in its goal of dividing the United States and our allies and partners. If anything, we are more united as we confront Russia's threats and aggression.